Hey y'all, this is Pastor Mike. I've got my coffee. Let's talk leadership. Up until this point, what we've dealt with in the life of Moses is we've dealt with God developing the individual who is going to be a leader. And we've dealt with God giving a call to that individual. For instance, we've dealt with Moses in his birth. God has a plan for him from the beginning, and God has a plan for you from the beginning. We've dealt with him from his birth, and we find that he is born a fine child. All of us are born fine children. All of us are born exactly the way God means for us to be, to accomplish what God created us to do. And Moses' mother realizes this. And so Moses, in this moment, is caught. The Pharaoh has ordered the death of all the newborn baby boys, and Moses is trapped in that moment. But his mother and the power of the Holy Spirit get him through this. Let me say this. Throughout your life, everything that happens, God is using every event to train you, develop you, and prepare you for what he made you to do. He did not, listen very carefully, he did not cause everything that's happened to you, but he will use everything that's happened to you. God did not cause Pharaoh to call for the slaughter of Israelite children. But God did use that moment to prepare the Israelites to say, we want out of here. We need out of here. And so Moses, as he grows and as he develops in the palace and as he learns in the palace, see, God used that moment to move him from, in any normal scenario, he would have been raised as a slave. In this scenario, he is raised in the palace as a royal. He remains that until he tries to accomplish what God's made him to do in his own way instead of waiting for God's timing. In doing that, he ends up killing an Egyptian soldier, which leaves him banished, which leaves him cast out into the desert. Hey, pause. Every great leader has a desert period in their lives. It just happens to us. You need actually that moment so where you can reflect, where you can contemplate. Listen, the great ideas you use to lead the rest of your life are usually born in desert moments because you stopped long enough to think them through and hear from the Holy Spirit about them. As Moses is a shepherd, and it's very interesting when you look into Israelite thinking. Ancient Israelite thinking said that shepherding was the perfect training ground for a king. Why? Because a shepherd has to take care of a flock that does not always think for itself. A shepherd has to love the flock so much that he would be willing to give his life for it. A shepherd has to be willing to be stern with the flock and to be merciful with the flock, to be gentle and to be strong. All of those balances are learned to be patient. All of those balances are learned by being a shepherd. And Moses, in doing this, is beginning to understand how to lead a large flock, a large group that does not always want to listen to him where he needs them to go and where they will be best cared for. And Moses learns to lead in this. God uses the moment, the desert moment. Then we come to the moment where Moses is before the burning bush and God gives him his call, but that's really just very unique to Moses. When you receive that specific call for your life, it's going to be very unique to you. It's going to be something that only you hear. Nobody else is going to know about it. Now, God has prepared other people that are prepared to receive it and prepared to hear it, but you're the only one that's going to know about it in the beginning. And so you've got to understand that as you begin to hear this, you've got to figure out how to communicate it in a way that it makes sense to other people because you're the only one that heard God's voice on this in the beginning. Now, as Moses moves on, he speaks this to Aaron. God has prepared Aaron's heart to receive this. Aaron now hears it. Moses, Aaron, and we find out later Miriam, the sister, all head to Egypt and head to Pharaoh. And when they get there, now the whole thing shifts. Listen to me. When God gives you a call, when God clarifies the call in your life, he does it through how he's developed you throughout your life. And he gives you a core group of people around you to whom that call makes sense. Think. The call that God puts on Moses' heart makes perfect sense to Aaron. The call that God puts on Moses' heart makes perfect sense to the Israelites when he went there. He did the right thing. He went there. He and Aaron understood the political process. They followed the political process, and they started the work. People were excited. The Israelites were excited to hear that God had remembered them because they had heard from their birth that there was a promised land that they were to go to. So Moses has now gotten to his inner circle. It's not Moses by himself. The longer it's you by yourself, the worse off you are. But Moses has now gotten to his inner circle. Now, I want you to hear me. A lot of leaders stop moving once they get their inner circle, because the inner circle, listen to me, will provide for you and will protect you. You can find a lot of comfort simply leading your inner circle, but you're not here for comfort. You're here to make an impact. And if you're going to make an impact, your truth has got to get outside of your inner circle. When that happens, the game changes. And you've got to know that. In Exodus chapter 5, let me read this for you. Moses is before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh, he says to Pharaoh, my God says, let my people go out into the desert to worship him. Moses is asking for something much smaller than what Moses actually intends. But he's kind of hoping to set the groundwork to get this, to get ultimately the release of the children of Israel. Pharaoh's response, and remember, Pharaoh views himself as a god. And he knows nothing really of the Hebrew God. And really nobody does, because the Hebrew God at this point is the God of a group of people who have come from one family. They are the children of Jacob, the children of Israel, and they have been in Egypt as a small group and then grown into a large group of slaves. No one is very familiar with who their God is. And actually their belief system has not yet been fully defined, because it's Moses that's going to do that on this journey. So now Pharaoh responds when Moses says, my God tells you to let these people go out in the desert and worship him. Here's Pharaoh's response. Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Remember, understand that this is a workforce for him. This is an economic engine for him. I will not let Israel go. I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword. You see, he's appealing to Pharaoh in a way that Pharaoh can understand. Pharaoh's gods are capricious like this. They will take shots at him. They'll get angry with Pharaoh, and they'll deal with him. They'll get angry with the Egyptian people, and they'll deal with it. Remember, the Egyptians viewed things like the Nile River as a god. So when the Nile floods and kills people, obviously the god of the Nile is angry with us. They view things like the crocodiles in the Nile as a god. When a crocodile takes a human being, obviously the god is angry with that human being for some reason. Moses is trying to communicate to Pharaoh in a way that Pharaoh will understand. He says then also, but the king of Egypt says, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. You see, this is an economic engine for him, and he needs to keep them under control. Watch how he tries to do this. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. That same day, the Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and the overseers in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. In other words, the straw made the process faster. It was part of the process. And the Egyptians would provide the straw for the Israelites. Now, what Pharaoh is saying is, since the people want to just quit work and go on a religious vacation of some kind that I don't understand, but then what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, don't make them gather their own straw. Now, they've added a step to the work. They've added more work to it. But he says, but don't lower their quota. So you have to accomplish the same amount, but you have more work. They are lazy. This is Pharaoh. They are lazy. That is why they're crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to the lies. In other words, Pharaoh is the first to use the old phrase, the beatings will continue until morale improves. And that's not an effective way to lead. Now listen, what happens when you begin to tell people outside your inner circle your vision is that people will oppose that vision. External opposition will always occur. It'll always be there. You need to expect it. Listen, we are now at the place that we've developed the vision. We understand the vision. We understand what we're doing. We understand where we're going. We understand how it's going to work. We understand what we want to see happen. We understand what we have to do next. It's all put together. We've got our team. We've got everything together. We've done our work. And yet when we explain it to people, when we tell it to people outside of our inner circle, there's opposition. They don't believe what we believe. They don't know what we know. They don't expect what we expect. They're going to push against it. And you should expect that. You should expect that people are not going to accept what you have to say, especially if you are doing something for God. Because the world does not understand our God. Just like Pharaoh didn't understand our God, the world around us does not understand our God. They don't get this whole spiritual truth idea. They don't get this whole spiritual aspect of leadership idea. And you can't expect them to. It's not where they're coming from. Moses is not afraid that his God will strike them with a plague or the sword if they don't go out and worship him. But he's trying to explain it to Pharaoh in a way that Pharaoh can understand. He's trying to speak to the world in a language that the world around him understands. Listen, hear me. Hear me very carefully on this. Don't be shocked. Listen, don't be shocked when the world acts like the world. Why does that shock us? I'm always amazed by that. I see pastors, I see Christians just like, oh my God, when the world acts like exactly what the world acts like. When the world acts like there is no God for them to respond to, why are you surprised by that? That's exactly the way they are supposed to respond. Don't be shocked by that. Pharaoh is reacting this way because, think about it. Think about the motivations of the world around you. Pharaoh's motivation in this moment is that the children of Israel are his slave labor source. They are cheap labor. They're not free. He still has to feed them. He still has to house them. But they are a cheap labor source. They do not get to make their own choices. They do not get days off. They do not get holidays. None of that happens. He has a cheap, endless labor force. And the idea that Moses would allow them to stop working and go out into the wilderness to worship is completely foreign to him. That should not shock us. In fact, let me be honest. In the Pharaoh's mind, that's not even him being unkind. He's just running business the way business works. You know, I'm often amazed by Christians who look at the business world and get mad because the business world doesn't act like a church. Well, listen, the business world is not a church. Well, they need to be spiritual. Well, some of them are, but some of them aren't. We cannot expect the political world, the corporate world, the social world. We can't expect any of those worlds to act like the church. They're not the church. They're not making decisions based on what God wants. So when you are going to finally give a public outing of what God has called you to, you need to expect external opposition because the world will always act like the world. Now, in chapter 5 as well, after the Pharaoh now makes it harder for the Israelites, watch what happens. The Israelite overseers realized they were in trouble when they were told, "You are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day." When they left Pharaoh, now Pharaoh's told them, here's what we're going to do. Because you guys are lazy and because you want to go out and worship your God, Moses told me what you guys want to do. And I think you're just being lazy. I don't believe in your God. I don't listen to your God. And this is what Moses says your God told you. You want it. So the answer is no. And we're now not going to get straw for you. You get your own straw, but the quotas don't go down. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, pay close attention. May the Lord look on you and judge you. You've made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and you've put a sword in their hand to kill us. You see what? These guys that were rejoicing because the Lord remembered them just a few days ago are now ready to lynch Moses and Aaron. They're now ready to just do away with them. They want to disown them. How dare you? Who do you think you are? All of those words are coming in. Look, expect external opposition, but also expect internal opposition. You need to be ready for that. You need to be prepared for that. And listen to me. Internal opposition is the most painful thing you will go through. And you will go through it over and over and over again. You need to understand this. You might say, well, I'm a better leader than that. I'm a better person than that. People will trust me. No. You got to understand, this is not about being a good leader or a bad leader. Now listen, a bad leader will get more internal opposition. That's true. But everybody will get some. And it'll come over time. Different people, different reasons, different moments, different ways. It'll come over time. Honestly, it's happened over and over and over again in my experience. But it's not always been the same way, and it's not been every day. It's not been every year even. Sometimes there are years in between these things. But when they happen, they hurt very, very deeply. You know why? Because when you are when you experience internal opposition, that means you have to expect friendly fire. Friendly fire is always the most painful because you're not prepared for it. You're not guarded against it. You don't guard yourself against your own people. You guard yourself against the enemy that is in front of you. I learned this early in ministry, and it was extremely painful. When I was first starting ministry, and there was this thing in the Wesleyan denomination that I serve in. There was this thing called a district youth president. That basically meant you were the leader of all of the youth pastors across a given area of Wesleyan churches. So my youth pastor was the district youth president and was stepping down from that. And he was stepping down at a moment where a whole group of youth pastors who had been in leadership for like 10, 15 years were all stepping down at the same time. So there was this huge sea change. I did not understand that at the time because I was only about 24, 25 years old, something like that. And so this change came up, and they said, you run for this. So, okay, I'll let my name run. And I ran against another youth pastor in the district, and I won. I thought nothing of it because what I had watched over time was these youth pastors all working together, seemingly in my mind focused on the same thing, and all of them pulling together, not battling against each other. What I didn't realize because I was young was that was a group that had developed that rhythm over a space of 10, 12 years, all of them working together. All of a sudden, we had a brand new group. That was one of the worst years of leadership in my life because I expected everyone to submit to the overall good of the organization. Instead, what I faced was someone who was very hurt by the fact that I won and he didn't. I didn't know that. I didn't know he was hurt by that. If I had known he was hurt by that, I would have totally changed the way I led. I would have totally had that conversation, but I didn't even realize it. Now, today, I might look at that and say, this person's probably angry with me. This person's probably upset. This person's probably disappointed. Then I didn't think to think that way. And he didn't think to think in terms of my expectations. We were both very young. And it ended up being a very ugly period. I actually thought by the time that year was over, I began to think my entire ministry might be over because I was receiving friendly fire. I expected it from the world. I didn't expect it from inside. Listen, you're going to get these kind of hits from inside and from outside. When you finally reveal what you believe God has called you to the world around you, you're going to have opposition from inside and outside. And you need to be ready to face it. Face it with grace. Face it with strength. Face it with the courage of knowing God's called you to this and God's on your side. But face it with the knowledge that it's not the end. It's simply a bump on the road. This opposition is normal. It is natural. Now listen, if you get it all the time, you're doing something wrong. But if you get it once in a while, then with grace, with mercy, but with strength and determination. You see, all of that melts. You got to have grace and mercy. You got to have strength and determination. You got to be soft and you got to be strong. If you can put those things together, you will put down and actually heal the internal opposition. And if you can put those things together, you will actually bring disgrace in the end to the external opposition. Because the world will finally look and see and say, you know, they were right. And that leader over there, they handled this wrong. And all of a sudden, God's name is praised because his people listened to their call, were not surprised when the world acted like the world, and were prepared with grace and mercy when even from inside the camp, they got shot at. Listen to me. You can do this. You can do this, and God will help you.